Welcome, everybody, to the Coach's Chronicle. I am really excited to have Michael Bungay Stanier here with us today. Michael, welcome.
I'm really happy to be here. Thanks for inviting me along. Congratulations on 1 year of getting a magazine out in the world. People probably underestimate just what it takes to do that. So that's a big moment for you.
Appreciate that. Yeah, it's been a wild journey and having tons of fun so far,
Great.
and looking to really step things up in year number two. Michael, let's dive right in. Most people, I'm assuming, who are tuning into this probably already have a sense of who you are and what you've accomplished in your lifetime so far, but we wanna dive in deep. We want to get into the nitty-gritty and help some coaches figure out how they can become better coaches.
Yeah.
You have positively influenced how many leaders think about coaching worldwide. What moment or realization on this path for you early on might have stoked that, might have created this
Yeah.
desire to go in the direction you have?
I'd point to two moments that have been really significant for me. The first is when I was a young guy, so 17 or 18. And I signed up for something called Youthline in Australia. And Youthline is a youth crisis telephone counseling call. And I volunteered there 3 or 4 years. And it was the first time I was trained in learning to ask a question and be quiet and listen to an answer. And it was the first moment that I realized that somebody's first answer is not necessarily the whole answer, the real answer, the deepest answer, that there's often more there. And it had come from an experience where I'd found myself in endless conversations with my teenage friends about, the angst of the teenage life, of which there's a lot. Teenagers have their social their social volume turned up loud, so they're particularly conscious about what they're feeling and how they are relative to everybody else. So it's an anxious time. I was pretty good at being present and listening to people, but I had no idea what I was doing or whether this was helpful or not. So doing this training is obviously planting a pretty significant seed for what would turn into showing up as a coach. And then uh, 20 years later or thereabouts, I'd had a life. I'd left Australia. I'd moved to England. I'd moved from England to Boston, then from Boston to Toronto. And I had set up my own little business out of necessity because I got fired from my job and I was increasingly unemployable because I'm like, I don't like having bosses and I didn't know what to do. But I did have an inclination that this coaching thing was going to be something. And here the crossroads for me was, do I build a practice or do I do something else? And I built up a coaching practice and then realized this wasn't as fulfilling as I thought, which was bizarre because I felt like I'd spent 20 years leading up to this moment of setting up a coaching practice. I mean, I could see the path. And that saying, inspiration is when your past suddenly makes sense. I'm like, this makes sense. And then it didn't make sense. And then I got involved in learning and development and training, and I got asked to build a coaching program. And this was such a key moment because this is when I suddenly realized. Actually, the moment was when I was asked to help facilitate a coach training program. So a coaching school had come in and they were working with one of the big banks in Canada to run session. And they basically just did life coach training, but for managers, but they didn't change anything. And I was like, this is terrible training for managers because even though some of the mechanics of being coach-like as a manager and being a coach in a life coaching business are similar, everything else is different. So I had this moment, really powerful for me, where I'm like, look, I really believe in the power of coaching as a technology. I really dislike the way it is being brought into the world outside coach training. And I've got an opinion around how this could be done differently and done better. So that's the catalyst for the coaching habit, and then Box of Crayons, which is the company connected to that, and the like, which is I'm on a quest to unweird coaching for normal people. Because all the people listening to this podcast and this conversation and reading the magazine, they're all a bit weird. They're already coaches. They're already kind of going, I've got the coaching thing. And I love coaches. But I'm really trying to bring the power of coaching to teachers and parents and therapists and managers and leaders and really anybody who is trying to bring out the best in somebody else.
Many people listening or reading this will know you from your very famous book, The Coaching Habit. Looking back now, how has your understanding of coaching evolved since writing that book?
Yeah. Um, there's something about the older you get, the more simpler you're trying to make things. So partly what's cool about this book, look, there's a few things that's cool about the coaching habit. One is it is still being bought and read 10 years after I published it, which is a miracle, quite frankly, because that every book hits a 10-year birthday, but most books have vanished into obscurity, including a whole bunch of my books. They have vanished, they will vanish, but the coaching habit carries on. The thing that I really like about the book is that it does kind of strip being more coach-like down to a few key things. It's like here's how to ask a question. Here are 7 good questions. But in the new edition, there's a 10-year edition coming out. There's a new chapter which is on the being of coaching. So if I've learned one thing, and this will be really bleedingly obvious to a bunch of people who are reading or listening to this, um, it's around the deeper impact I think coaching can provide. So, on the one hand, coaching shows up as a look, I'm here to help you sort some stuff out to solve some problems. There's a challenge at hand. What's the challenge? How do you really understand what the challenge is? How do you generate some better ideas around how to solve it? How do you get on with it and move to action and do something differently? So that's the kind of the mechanics of it. New insight, new action, different outcome, and you hope that that grows. But the deeper gift, I think, what that coaching offers is it allows people to feel seen and to feel heard and to feel encouraged. Uh, I mean, I'm not sure if this is true for you as well, Jonathan, but I know when the people I've coached, like sometimes my coaching is great. Pow, there's an insight and things change, and everyone's like, it's a miracle. And I'm like, it's a miracle. And there's other times it's the opposite where I'm like, I'm really trying hard and it just nothing's really working. We haven't really solved anything. It just hasn't clicked somehow. But when I think back on the coaches that I've had, what I don't really remember is all the stuff that they've helped me with. I mean, I do a bit, but not really. What I really feel is feeling seen and feeling heard and feeling encouraged. So I think that's the new insight for me, which is this deeper offer of what it can generate and the onus that puts on somebody who's a coach, which is, so how do I show up? So I don't have my anxiety to prove my value by fixing things gets in the way of me being present to somebody and helping them feel seen and heard and encouraged.
I love that so much, Michael. It's just it changes the emphasis from solving problems to creating deeper connections with clients,
Yeah. I mean, there's
which
something about solving problems as well. That's helpful.
yeah,
I
yeah,
mean,
getting paid for
you don't just want
that.
people to go, no, man, I see you. I know we're not making any progress on the crises in your life right now, but I see you. But there is that kind of that deeper gift I think that coaching can really offer up.
Amazing. You often talk about curiosity as a leadership superpower.
Mm.
Why is staying curious so difficult for people at times?
Well, we've just been trained really for a long time to value something other than curiosity, which is like having the answer. Um, it starts at the earliest of ages. You send your 4-year-old or 5-year-old to school, and the teacher goes, "Who knows?" And everybody goes like, "I know, I know, I know." I've got my hand up. I used to kind of like hold my hand up here because I'm like, this is going to take some time, so I'm kind of locking my arm into place there. Um, and then, of course, as we get a bit older, we learn how to be a little less uncool about the eagerness to have the answer, but we're still kind of being tested. We're still being said, like, the way you make progress is you get an A or you have a GPA score or whatever your scoring system is. And then when we finally make it into the working world, we're like, well, what can you do? What do you know? What can you what's the problem that we need to solve? And so we've got this first layer, which is a very deeply embedded belief that the way you prove your worth is by having the answers. But then there's this kind of deeper level below that, which is to sort of say the way we maintain our status in the world is by having the answers. That's certainly one way. By being the person who saves everybody else, the rescuer. People know the drama triangle. It's like I love playing the drama triangle role, the rescuer role. Or it's that status of maintaining control, having your hands on the steering wheel. You know, there's a TEDx talk I did around how to tame your advice monster. And what I'm talking about here are the three different advice monsters, the know it, or the tell it, save it, and control it. And these are the kind of the kind of fancy term, these are the ego states, if you like, that have us um, getting in our own way of being curious. Because when you stay curious, you are saying, hey, I may not have the answer. And even if I do, I'm going to let you figure out the answer. And I'm not going to try and save you because I'm going to let you figure this out yourself. I'm going to give you agency and autonomy and confidence and competence. And I'm giving up some control here because I'm actually helping you figure this. You're going to figure out your own stuff rather than me figuring it out for you. I'm empowering you. I'm giving you the power in the moment in the situation. So, there's a kind of a profound insight for me, which is like coaching sounds easy enough. It's like rattle off some questions, but actually, you're dismantling some of your ego state, some of your status in an act of service to somebody else.
Mhm. I love that, the way you put that. Let's hone in on this advice monster for a minute, which I saw your TED talk. It's excellent.
Yes.
What does taming the advice monster actually look like in practice?
So the definition I give of coaching in the coaching habit and in 8,000 interviews since then is a behavioral one, and it's relatively simple. And it's like this: can you stay curious a little bit longer? And can you rush to action and advice giving a little bit more slowly? Now, I remember when I started teaching coaching, and I'd be looking up all these definitions, and I found a bit too many of them are kind of a bit too theoretical or a bit woo-woo or a bit abstract. I'm going to be the wind beneath your wings. I'm like, that doesn't really work for me. But this very simple insight, which is like, this is simple and difficult. Can you stay curious a little bit longer? Can you rush to action and advice giving a little bit more slowly? So I'm not totally sure what it means for each person listening in or honing in on this conversation around what it means to tame your advice monster. But it's useful to know which of the three advice monsters is your particular friend. Is it I need to have the answers? That if I don't have all the answers for all the people to solve all the problems, I failed. Is it around saving people? If I don't save people from all the problems and all the challenges and all the stress and all the risk all the time, I failed. Or is it the control? If I don't fight off the future, if I don't make everything known and predictable and risk free, I failed. Which is your particular trigger? And then so much of it is a learned practice of just sh not not speaking. If I can be honest around that, in the book, I think I reference a study that says GPs, general doctors, interrupt their patients on average after about, I think it's 17 seconds. That number may not be quite right, but it's about that. Um, and I always thought that was a bit harsh for doctors because I'm like, feels like humans. That's a human thing. Humans love to interrupt other people. So this ability to um, uh, not not reactively go the way my job to think to re in a reactive, non-thoughtful way. Look, my job here is just to tell people what to do and have the idea. That's the shift in terms of starting to tame your advice monster.
Mhm. How do you see AI changing the way we formulate questions and harvest answers?
Yeah, it's a God. Well, that's a non-trivial question, and it feels like the answer to that changes about every 48 hours as a new AI development happens. But 20 years ago, I created a book called Get Unstuck and Get Going on the Stuff That Matters. And the way it worked is this. It's like one of those kids' flip books, where you got kind of like a ballerina's head and a soccer player's body and a scuba diver's legs, and you could kind of flip the flips around and kind of make fun, crazy combinations, which I never quite understood as a kind of actual fun thing to do. I'm like, it just looks weird. But I used it as a way of constructing a book. And the idea is that people would bring a challenge to the book. They'd then open the book at one of the 100,000 different combinations that you could have. On each of the three flip sections, there'd be a question or two. And the questions would make you think differently about your challenge and move you into a, what are you going to do about it? Kind of action plan. Because I knew 20 years ago that there's a bunch of things about coaching that are actually quite mechanical. It's a way of if you can hold space for a process, people can do the work themselves. Um, and I really got to understand that when I was teaching coaching habit content in different countries around the world. And what I would do is I would actually coach people in languages I didn't speak. So, I'd be in Finland, up in the north of Norway, or Lapland, up in the north of Norway, and I'd be having this conversation with engineers from Nokia, and I'd ask them a question in English, "What's on your mind?" And they'd answer me in Finnish or Norwegian or whatever it might be, and I know I'm alienating the entire Nordic listening group here as I muddle up all these countries, so apologies for everybody there. But they'd answer me in Finnish, and I go, okay, so that sounds like a thing. I didn't know what they were saying, but it sounded like a thing. And I go, so what's the challenge here for you? And they would answer in Finnish, and I go, great, what else? What else is a challenge? And they'd give me another answer, and I go, great, what else? And they give me another answer in Finnish, and I go, great. So what's the real challenge then here? And they go, oh my God, it's this in Finnish. And there's a way that what we do as coaches is we hold space and we move people through a process. And we can do that with an intensity and a fierceness and a kind of a wholeheartedness. But there's a way that AI can do that really well as well. So I think AI is honestly, without suddenly making things go a bit bleak, a bit of an existential threat for a lot of coaches out there. Because if you're a coach where, you're like, I've got a few learned things, I've got a few learned processes. Well, if you can learn those processes, then AI can learn those processes. And everybody on a weekly basis is getting a bit more comfortable going, I'm going to trust AI to do this thing. So I think it's a really big question around, look, AI can probably ask good questions. They can probably remember more than you as a coach can, so they can pull in better historical data. They can do all sorts of things that will trump you as a coach. So what do you do as a coach that AI can't do? And there there is, I think it can come back to that insight around people feeling seen and heard and encouraged in a way that I don't know this to be 100% true, but I'm going to guess that for a while at least, that feels like a more human offering than an AI offering.
Hmm. Yeah.
What are you
I was
thinking? I mean,
thinking,
when you think of AI, on a scale of 1 to 10, how freaked out are you by it?
I'm not, maybe the jury's out still. I'm waiting
Yeah,
to see how things develop. I see its potential. It's a very powerful tool. But exactly how you described, I think it's really about being able to see and hear people and encourage them and for them to feel human connection
yeah.
more than simply having questions and answered and problem solved.
Because
I
I
think
think
that
that's possibly one of the unexpected consequences of AI is people have far better answers, but are also far more isolated because now they're not connecting with people to help figure out stuff. They're just like me and my agent. We're just going to work together. and it's just me and a pseudo human voice. So there's something that could be a great loss here. But it's yeah. Yeah, I'm looking forward to the cover of the magazine. It just has a little computer. It's like a Mac Mini on the front of it going, "Here's your new coach."
Yeah.
Don't freak
Yeah.
out, people.
Yeah, I think what I imagine will happen, Michael, is the better coaches will get the lion's share of the business. It'll
Yeah,
just push people into greater levels of success, and the mediocre will fall behind, and it will be harder to make your mark as a coach moving forward until you've really
yeah.
mastered the ability to connect with clients on a
Yeah,
deeper
it's
level.
tough. I mean, it's already, coaching is already being commoditized in a way where, companies like BetterUp and the like, where they're like, we're scooping up a bunch of coaches, we're offering them at a relatively cheap price to corporate clients. As a coach, you're in this dilemma, which is like, well, it's work and it's money and an experience, which are things that I want, but it also puts you in at a kind of grunt laborer level rather than a higher end expert. So it's a tricky thing to figure out how to navigate.
Yeah, agreed. The coach farm. Um, your work on building the best possible relationship is
Yeah,
powerful.
thanks.
What's one shift that transforms a working relationship quickly?
Well, the insight for this book is the quality of your working relationships have a outsized impact on the happiness you feel in the work and the success you have with the work. And that is whether you're working kind of internally in an organization, so you've got team members and people to work with, or if you're a coach and you're like, I'm building working relationships with my clients and maybe my own small team around how we do work. And most of us don't do much with that insight. We all go, well, that's true. When I think of like the miserable times I had at work, it was mostly because I had a miserable person, not because I was doing miserable work. A miserable person as a boss or a manager or whatever. And when I think of the very best times of the work I was doing, it's mostly because I was doing something cool with other people. But most of us then go, well, I just hope I get lucky next time or this time. I'll pray to the gods that, I'll have a great working relationship. And I'd like to tip the odds more in people's favor to have better working relationships. And so the key action here, and I kind of learned this broadly from a guy called Peter Block, who's he's like another 20 years down the path ahead of me in terms of trying to influence this field. Um, it's having a conversation about how you work together before you start working together. And I know coaches often do let's have a pre-contracting session, which is kind of let's lay out the way this all unfold. But I think it really gets into some of the more profound questions, which is here's how I'll bring my best. How will you bring your best? What is your best? What is my best? And actually having an exchange of information that says, look, we've got a sense of what our best is. We've got a sense of how to bring out our best. We've got a sense of the mechanics of how to work together more successfully. And we have an understanding of what we're going to do when the shit hits the fan and things, go off the rails a little bit, which they inevitably do. So, in the book, I call this a keystone conversation, 5 core questions to say, hey, let's give ourselves a chance to set up our working relationship in the best possible way so we avoid what's annoying with each other and we amplify what's great in terms of how we work together.
Hmm. Okay, well, things are inevitably going to go wrong at some point, and you're
Yeah.
going to try these things, and sometimes they still won't work out. So, what should leaders do when a relationship just isn't working despite best efforts?
Well, it's a broad question. So it depends. It depends on the context a lot. You know, it is first of all, uh, well, here's how I might roll through the order of priorities, how I might be thinking about this. The first I'd be going is, okay, so what is good enough? Like, I'm not striving to make every working relationship, perfect and, a unicorn tap dancing its way through a meadow, burping up rainbows. I'm trying to make every relationship the best possible version of that relationship. And that might mean it's like, it's not a great working relationship, but it's the best we can get. And I'm going to be okay with good enough. So a good place to start is like, well, what's good enough? And are we even close to that? Um, if it is not close to good enough, then you got some bigger questions, which is like, okay, is this a relationship I can separate myself from in some way? Like, I'm like, okay, so we just need to terminate it, whether it means resigning or whether it means being firing somebody or whether it means just kind of wrapping up the contract or whatever it might be. You're like, okay, this isn't working. How do we bring this to an end that, you know, as much as you want to, maintains dignity for both sides of the working relationship? And if you're stuck and you're like, this is not close to being good enough, and I can't do anything about it, I'm stuck with this working relationship, then I think you've got a choice to go, all right, how do I minimize the impact of this working relationship on my work and on my life? So, how do I just shut down the various ways that this might be dragging you down? Minimize the work that they're doing, shrink their area of responsibility, have a way of you processing the anger and annoyance and sadness and whatever else bubbles up around that. How do I kind of minimize that impact? And then you might go, what needs to be true for this working relationship to be 10% better? Because it's really, I'm kind of speaking, I'm looking at the scars I carry around, failed working relationships. And I know that one of my modes is to move into, you know, open up my own veins and die on the carpet, bleeding out in an attempt to make a relationship work, where the other person just isn't interested in making that working relationship work. So it's a question of what needs to be true for this to get 10% better, and is that worth it? Because every choice you make, this is in life, not just in working relationships, every choice you make has prizes and punishments. There's an upside and there's a downside. There's an outcome you might get, but there's a cost to that outcome. And it's really a question of going, do I think that the prize might outweigh the punishment in terms of this? Because it might not. And one of the things that might happen is you go, this relationship is going to be a festering sore in my life for the next little while because I've weighed up all the options. And honestly, the best thing for me to do is just suck it up for a bit longer.
Yeah, really deciding in advance if it's even worth rolling up the sleeves and digging
Yeah.
in.
Because sometimes, I mean, in a different context, I heard somebody in Silicon Valley. This is probably 4 or 5 years ago, before Silicon Valley became a bit even more tainted with the nutso-ness that's happening there. Um, Going, look, if you're trying to scale a company really rapidly and you're kind of in the leadership position, one of the things that you notice is there is stuff going wrong all over the place. It is generally a disaster. And part of the discipline of being a leader when you're scaling things up is deciding which things you just let burn. Like there's a dumpster fire over there. Everything in my life has told me to put out dumpster fires because it's a dumpster fire. But actually, I have to maintain my focus on the thing that matters, and that means I just have to get used to the dumpster fire burning and just going, yeah, it's terrible, and it's going to stay terrible for a bit longer.
Michael, you write about worthy goals. How
Yep.
can someone recognize when they're pursuing a worthy goal versus just staying busy?
So this is a helpful topic for coaches, and it's also a field where there's a lot of stuff around goal setting. And I do think there's a way that as coaches, we can get a little transactional about trying to drive our clients to, have success with the goals that they have. And, most people people suffer from an abundance of things to do rather than an underabundance of things to do. So in the How to Begin book, which is kind of where this kind of worthy goal concept lives, I'm really talking about, what's one of the big things that you want to be taking on? We've all heard of the apocryphal lecturer teacher with the jar, and he's got pebbles and he's got rocks and he's got sand, and he's like, how do I get all of this stuff into the jar? And the secret is you put in the big rocks, and then you put in the small rocks, and then you put in the sand, and then you put in whatever else you want to put in there. So this is kind of a big rock thing, which is like if you're taking on one or two big things, how do you figure out what to say yes to? Because there's a way that when you get to a certain age, a certain level of experience, which I'm going to say I'm definitely at because I'm old, and you're getting there because you're not quite as old, but oldish. And you're like, I can actually do a bunch of stuff now. Like I'm just been around long enough that I can do a bunch of stuff. What do I want? What do I want to do? And so the formula for figuring out a worthy goal is there are three parts to it. It needs to be thrilling, it needs to be important, and it needs to be daunting. Thrilling means, does this light you up? Does this actually get you excited? Does this actually make you go, this would be cool? Man, I would love to be doing this. And it's a really helpful place to start because actually a lot of us inherit goals and expectations and obligations, which we're like, I kind of have to do this, but I'm not that excited about it. And, one of the most powerful things you can do as a coach for others, but also for yourself is to go, do I really care about this? Because I need this to have some internal motivation to keep me going. Like for you, Jonathan, as you think about the magazine and all the stuff you've been building for a year, my guess is, first of all, it's probably thrilling for you in some way. You're like, actually, I love this stuff. I love designing the covers. I love having the conversations. I love feeling like I'm a force for good in the coaching world. And that's been helpful because if you're if your first year of business has been like everybody else's first year of business, it's been up, it's been down, it's been disappointing, there's been highs, there's been lows. And actually that sense of thrillingness has actually been really helpful for you to kind of stay connected to. That's the that's the internal motivation. The second driver is it needs to be important. And by important, the phrase I like, which comes from a woman called Jacqueline Novogratz, who is the founder of Acumen and writer of a number of TED Talks and books. The call to action she puts down is how do you give more to the world than you take? So here, when it's important, you're like, actually, how does this make this a better world? How does this contribute in a way beyond just my own, oh, this is fun, to actually going, this is a way that my world gets a bit better. Whether your world is your family or your neighborhood or your sphere of influence or your community of expertise or your country or whatever, you can play different scales. So when I think about you and your work, Jonathan, I'm like, my guess is you're like, this is a contribution to the world of coaching. This helps connect coaches. This helps coaches be smarter. This helps coaches feel seen. This fills a gap in the world of coaching. It's not just you're like, oh, I'm gonna make a shed ton of money from my coaching magazine. It's more of I've got a mission and a purpose to the work that you do.
Yeah.
So thrilling and important. In some ways, you're articulating both an internal drive and an external pull, an internal push, an external pull, because both of them are helpful when times get hard or when times get confusing. It's like, why am I doing this? And then the third element is that you want a project to be daunting, because a daunting is what keeps you learning and growing. And there's a line in How to Begin, which I love. Self-serving, I know, because I wrote it. But it's just a powerful hook for me, which is we unlock our greatness by working on the hard things. And what daunting does is it says, hey, look, you want to keep learning, keep growing, keep evolving, keep moving towards the best version of who you can be. And the way you do that is you take on stuff that's just a little bit beyond your grasp. And again, if I look at the work you're doing, I'm like, I bet Jonathan's had moments where he goes, "What the hell am I doing here?" And I don't actually really know what I'm doing here. I'm on the edge of my own sense of self and my sense of competence and my sense of confidence. And when you sit here 12 months on from launching the magazine and you look back at Jonathan 12 months ago, I'm guessing you're looking at yourself and going, "Look, I'm different. I'm smarter, I'm braver, I'm clearer, I'm bolder." You've had an experience where the work has not just been about the work, it's about how do you learn and grow and become the next best version of Jonathan through the work.
Fabulous. You were talking about the daunting aspect, and if we're thinking about worthy goals and big things, the daunting element for me is the how big can it get?
Right.
It kind of like is teasing you to think bigger. And so the daunting element is really about, forcing expansion in some ways.
Yeah, it's
Yeah.
one of the, I mean, this isn't my idea, but it's a powerful insight that it can be really helpful to dream at a 10x level, not a 2x level. Because at a 2x level, you're being invited to just do the same stuff, but a bit better, faster, quicker, smarter. At a 10x level, you're like, oh, this, I can't just accelerate. I've actually got to rethink what this looks like and how I might do this. So what does 10x, my current goal for this magazine, look like? And what does that open up for me in terms of what I need to be thinking about, what skills I need to have, what revenue I need to generate, what support I need to hire, all of those good things.
Yeah. Welcome to my world. What are one of the big things, worthy goals that you're personally working towards right now, Michael?
Well, the way I tend to run my life, at least most of the time, and in theory, is I'm very project based. So I got this idea from a guy called Kevin Kelly, who founded Wired, and is just a smart guy. He has a wonderful blog and resource at kk.org, O-R-G. Um, and I got this idea from him of a death clock, which is you work out when you're going to die. I mean, statistically, based on what do they call it, actuaries figure out, statistically, if you're a white man, relatively good health, living in Canada, and you're 58 and a half or whatever it is that I am, what does that tell you about when you're likely to die? And I did this exercise 10 years ago, and for me, it's like sometime in the late 2030s. And Kevin Kelly also said, and you've got about 5 years per project. It takes about 5 years to really do.
Okay, so what are one of the big things or worthy goals that you're working towards right now, Michael?
So the starting point is for me to figure out when I'm going to die. And I got this idea from Kevin Kelly. He calls it the death clock. You'll find it at his blog, kk.org. And it's like you work out when your death date's going to be based on actuary tables and whatever. Obviously, it's statistically when you're going to die, not when you're actually going to die. But for me, it said, look, I've got about 15 to 20 years left. And Kevin Kelly also says you've got roughly one project every 5 years, one big project every 5 years. So what are you up for? So I combined that, going, I've got 3 or 4 projects left with a sense of purpose. And the way I articulate my purpose is how do I infect 1 billion people with the possibility virus? Which, is a 30-year-old mission for me. Sounded better around infecting people with viruses before COVID came along, but what can you do? For me, it's around how do I find ways of getting tools into people's hands, mindsets, so they make braver choices in terms of how they show up and what they do with in the world. So all of that means that I've got a particular focus this year on the coaching habit because we've got a 10-year edition of the book coming out end of March 2026. And we want to kind of have some fun with that. Um, find the fans of the coaching habit and invite them to go a bit deeper and a bit braver into this world of coaching, but also find a new group of readers for the coaching habit. And we're going to focus on parents, particularly parents of kids with adolescent brains. So 10 to 25 is the kind of the broad zone. So there's a lot of thinking going around. How do we help this be a really good parenting book? It's already a good coaching book and a good managing book, but how does it become a really great parenting book? That's a big goal for me around that. And then I've got another project called Change Signal, which is around how does change happen in organizations. And it's a podcast and it's a newsletter and it's possibly a book coming. But honestly, I'm at a bit of a crossroads about it because I'm like, it's it may not pass the thrilling, important, daunting test. It did when I started it a year ago, but as I've got into it, I'm like, I'm not sure this is as thrilling for me as I thought it would be. But I'm really suffering from sunk cost, whatever that is called, where I'm like, but I've invested so much time and money and effort into making this work. Maybe I should just keep going. And I'm like, sunk cost theory would say if you wouldn't start it now, you should stop doing it now. So I'm really, one of my challenges is figuring out how to stop doing a project that I started and it hasn't worked.
Oh, I'm sure so many people can relate to that, having started something and somewhere through it, the thrill or the importance or something about it has shifted, and you're trying to figure out how you infuse that back into it or just
Yeah,
cut bait. So,
yeah,
oh, I
yeah.
appreciate that. And I appreciate your candor around it. How do you stay challenged after achieving so much, Michael?
I don't. I lie around on a sofa. I have people feeding me grapes, fanning me. I'm like beyond challenge now. Um, you know, how do I say challenged? Uh, First of all, it's like figuring out, what's the work that I am best at doing? And the work I'm best at doing is writing and teaching. Like I am good at taking complicated stuff and making it feel more accessible and simpler for people to do. So it's realizing that that's the important part of what I do. That's how I try and make the world better, is through me as a teacher. But the other thing that I've been thinking about and sitting with is like, how do I be a good elder? An elder has all sorts of kind of weight to it and kind of baggage in some ways around it. But I'm like, okay, so in some ways I've already won. Like I've somehow won this game. Like I've got into my late 50s, I've become a successful author, I've got just enough fame that nobody really knows who I am, but once a month somebody comes up and says something nice to me. I'm financially stable, I'm healthy, I've been married for 30 years. You know, I nailed it. Plus I'm not to mention I'm a straight white dude, so I've got the whole of that behind me as well. So a good deal of this is like it's less interesting about what I'm ambitious for. It's more about what's my role of service now. And the role of an elder is to step out of the spotlight, off the stage, and be an encouraging voice from the side to allow other people to step into spotlights and onto the stage. So I'm just sitting with the interesting tension of that, which is like I've still got more to teach. Um, and there's a sense of obligation that comes with reputation. Like, people look to me, not that many, but some people look to me around, teaching stuff. So how do I be a good teacher there? But at the same time, how do I find a way to exit gracefully? and played a slightly different role.
Oh, I appreciate that so much. Thank you.
Yeah, still I
If
haven't figured that
someone,
out.
this is the journey. Yeah, of
Yeah.
course. Like shifting your identity a little bit. If someone wanted to become more coach-like starting tomorrow, what's the simplest path or habit to begin with?
I where would you start? Well, at a mindset level of kind of reframing how you see the world, think to yourself, look, rather than how do I tell people what to do, how do I manage them, how do I lead them, how do I parent them, it's more how do I help them feel seen and heard and encouraged. It's like, what's the game you're playing here? What does success look like for you? Um, and then you can choose whether to add or subtract. They're both good strategies. The subtraction is just get a little more attuned to how quickly you leap in with advice and guidance and opinions and suggestions and offers, and how quickly you move to helping as your default response. And remove that, slow that down. And then if you want to add something, it's like find a question. I mean, there are 7 in the Coaching Habit book, but there's lots of other good questions out there in the world. You can Google the 7 questions on the Coaching Habit book, so you don't have to even buy it. You can just find them online. And pick a person, pick a moment, pick a question, and start practicing in a small way with that person.
You inevitably work with organizations, leaders, et cetera. What are you seeing in organizations right now that gives you hope? I think people are craving a lot of hope right now.
Well, I think it's fair to say that there's at the moment there's a lot of ambiguity in organizations and uncertainty and not hopelessness, but a certain anxiety around what is happening to the world of work, because suddenly AI is making it feel like, well, how secure is anything now? What even is work? But I do think what's hopeful is uh, it's many of the things I've been talking about, which is look, in so many the greatest gift we bring others is be seen, be heard, be encouraged. And as people find ways of speeding up the work that they do, and becoming more productive and more efficient, which is the mechanical promise of AI. It's like what do you do with the rest of that time? And there's a way that you can use that to increase your capacity to hold space for change and hold space for human connection.
Final question, Michael. If you could give one piece of, oh my gosh, I can't believe this word is in here, advice
I know.
to a new coach entering the industry today, what would it be?
Um, get good at marketing and sales because there's lots of coaches who are struggling, who are excellent coaches, but they just hope that they don't have to market or sell themselves. And there are a few not great coaches who are actually doing pretty well because they have figured out how to market and sell themselves. So if you are entering the market as a coach, you need to understand what it means to run a business, and businesses need to market and sell. And it's worth really trying to figure out what actually works because there's a bunch of fake marketing that you can do that feels like marketing, but if it doesn't actually bring clients or prospects or people who might be the people you can best serve to you, then it doesn't work. So social media doesn't work for most people most of the time. It might work for you, you might crack it, it might be a thing, but really go there's no point in me being a great coach if I am not a savvy marketer. So get savvy around how you market.
Fabulous advice. Michael, I want to thank you so much for your time and for your wisdom and for your heart and all the service that you're creating for the world and our coaching industry. And thank you for being with us here in the Coaches Chronicle today.
Thank you. It's been a pleasure.